I used to think being positive all the time and only thinking happy thoughts was the key to actual happiness. But after years of pushing down what I really felt, I became more depressed and more anxious than I ever was before. In this video, we are talking about toxic positivity, exactly what that is, the psychology behind it, why it is so harmful, and what we can do instead. So back in college, I experienced what was probably like my second major depressive episode. I didn't know it was depression at the time, but looking back, it definitely was. I'm a college student, right? I can't afford therapy. I can't afford medication. So what I found was the self-help section in Barnes & Noble. Where's it Nobles? Whatever. At that time, manifestation was a really big thing, so that is what most of the self-help section was. It was all about books on manifestation, and if you just think whatever, then you're going to will it into existence. So at that time, a lot of the advice was, if you're feeling sad or unhappy, it's because you're having too many unhappy thoughts. So you just need to learn how to have happier thoughts and always happy thoughts, and then you will be happier. You will bring more positivity into your life if you only think happy thoughts. Bad things are happening to you because you're thinking bad things and you're not thinking good enough. So I really took that to heart, and I thought that because I could just not get out of this depression, it was my fault because I was thinking too badly. And then I felt frustrated with myself because I couldn't only think happy thoughts. Like, I felt very shameful that I was having not so great thoughts and feelings. I thought there was something wrong with me, and that's why I just couldn't get out of this cycle of depression, because there was something wrong with the way I was thinking, and that's why I kept feeling bad and bad things kept happening to me. So you'll never believe what happened. I became more depressed and more anxious than I have ever been in my whole life. So like I said, this was back in college, but I still think that only positivity mindset is still very much apparent in today's society. It just looks a little bit different, especially because of social media. How many Instagram feeds do you see that have like hashtag blessed everywhere, and it's only like a highlight reel of how perfect this person's life is, and they never have a bad day, everything's wonderful all the time. You go to your doctor's office or your therapist's office. I am just as guilty of this when I had my own office for therapy and I was seeing therapy patients. We have these posters and they say, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars. I'm not saying there's anything inherently bad with those sort of motivational things, but I feel like positivity is just sort of demanded from us as a society. Like, you cannot escape it. This sort of societal pressure to constantly be happy is a huge contrast to how we actually feel as humans and what the actual human life experience really is. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of space for things like anger, sadness, guilt, frustration, those not so good feelings. It just doesn't seem like our society sort of allows us to feel that. We instead encourage just positivity all the time. And when you first think about it, it's like, wait, this is a good thing, right? Like, if we're focusing on only being positive, that's good. There can only be good outcomes from that. And there is a lot of research that supports that. There is research that says, yes, the more positive we are, the better mindset we have, and it's a good thing in our life. And when something unavoidable happens to us, or something happens to us that's completely out of our control, that's causing us a lot of stress, it does help to look at the silver lining in those situations. But here's where things get a little bit tricky. So genuine optimism can be a really powerful thing and a very powerful tool for resilience. Resilience is getting through things. So there's a fine line between that, healthy positivity, and what we call toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is the constant push for positivity, and you suppress any sort of negative emotion. It's like it doesn't exist. We don't allow it to exist. So let's look at that a little bit further, okay? So genuine optimism. Optimism is not a bad thing. Optimism is where we stay hopeful despite really stressful circumstances or a really stressful life, okay? So optimism is, yeah, this really sucks right now, but I have hope this is gonna get better. I know this will get better over time. This pain will lessen over time. I just gotta get there. So we are still recognizing there's some uncomfortableness there, right? Like, we acknowledge, yeah, this sucks right now, but I'm hopeful it'll get better. That is optimism, and that is a good thing. That helps us be more resilient and sort of weather through those not so great times. Optimism still allows allows for space to feel the sadness, the guilt, the frustration, whatever it is. And optimism still lets us recognize that those are normal, those are okay, it's healthy to feel those things, there's nothing wrong with it, but I know that I'm going to feel better in the future, or I'm hopeful I will feel better in the future still too. So what toxic positivity is, that is different from optimism again, right? Toxic positivity is where we are taking positivity to the extreme. We are denying any sort of negative emotions exist altogether. We're not allowed to feel uncomfortable. We're not allowed to feel anything painful. We can't talk about those things. We don't acknowledge those things. And ironically, by doing that, we actually make our mental health worse in the long run. Toxic positivity is actually shown to increase the amount of depression and anxiety we experience. I think a really good way to look at this, besides toxic positivity, because I think toxic is just way overused in our language today, I think a really good way to think of this as, if I could speak, a really good way to look at this is forced positivity. We are forcing ourselves to be positive no matter what. Negative feelings don't exist. Uncomfortable feelings don't exist. It's only positivity. It's very much forced. So what does toxic positivity really look like? So it can show up in several different ways, but I think the most common way is when we are trying to be supportive of someone else, but it's actually toxic positivity. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you were fired, you lost your job, and you're telling your best friend that you got fired. You lost the job. And your best friend says, just stay positive. Everything happens for a reason. I just know something's gonna work out for you. It sounds supportive, it sounds comforting, and usually when we use those words, we are trying to be supportive and comforting, but it's actually toxic positivity. Why is it toxic positivity? Because it is really shutting down any sort of way for that person to express pain or uncomfortable feelings. It shuts down any sort of opportunity to express those not so good feelings, the non-positive feelings. When we say it, we just don't have an opportunity to discuss them any further. When we say, we'll just stay positive, it's going to be okay. And how have you felt when someone has used that phrase with you? Because I know it's happened to you. It's happened to all of us. How do we really feel when someone says that? We might feel maybe some support in the moment, but usually we feel misunderstood, or we feel like we can't really say what we want to say because it's too much of a burden for that other person, or they don't really want to hear how we're feeling because they just kind of shut it down. They didn't allow us any more opportunity to discuss anything. We might also feel really shameful or guilty for feeling anything but positive because you're like, they're right. I should stay on the bright side. Everything does happen for a reason. I shouldn't feel bad. I can't feel bad anymore. I just have to stay positive. So if you find yourself feeling bad when you feel angry or sad or some sort of other uncomfortable or painful emotion, and you feel like you're supposed to be stoic and put together all the time, even when your life is falling apart, you are probably stuck in that toxic positivity trap and you don't even know it. Also, take a look even at our work environments. Let's say you're at work and your work is experiencing layoffs, like they've got to lay off some people. How many times has your boss or the management said, we need to stay positive during these tough times? And then oftentimes you'll get a pizza. Did you eye roll? Because this has happened to me so many times in my workplace. And at first I really thought that it was just their way to sort of make us feel better, but really dive deep into that, really decipher that. How likely are you to go to your boss then and tell them, I feel really stressed right now. This is a really scary time. What can I do? When your boss says, we just gotta be tough, does that encourage you to talk about your true emotions? No, it does not at all. So even our workplaces are using this toxic positivity shit because they want to shut down. I mean, honestly, a lot of management just wants to shut down any sort of, they don't want to hear complaints from their employees, right? They just want you to do your fucking job. Toxic positivity in the workplace absolutely exists. It absolutely happens because they don't want to hear your shit. So why do we fall into this trap of forced positivity? positivity? Why are we so drawn to the idea that we should only be positive, even though that's really not realistic? So what forced positivity is it is essentially an avoidance strategy. When we experience something not so great in our lives, something stressful, something traumatic, and we have those not so good feelings about it, our brain naturally looks for ways to get out of that uncomfortableness. I'm not sure that is the right word, but it looks for an escape route, essentially. Our brain doesn't want us to feel those painful feelings. It has to find a way out of that. So forced positivity seems like the perfect solution. I just think happy thoughts and the bad feelings go away. How many of your parents told you growing up, just think happy thoughts? How many times have you seen on Twitter, especially if you are part of the small streamer live streaming community at all? I see this all the time on people's posts. They post something painful or, something just like a not so great situation, and all the comments are, just stay positive, just look on the bright side, it's all gonna work out. I see it all the time. Our society just really has developed this deep-seated discomfort with negative emotions and pain. And again, our brain is naturally wired to avoid those things. It is actively looking for ways to avoid the uncomfortable feelings. So on top of our brain trying to escape it, we also have this society that says feeling sad, feeling angry, or whatever is wrong, it's weak, that's not the right way to do this. So that attitude feeds into this never-ending cycle of forced or toxic positivity. So it creates this environment, and we've created this society where people feel pressured to seem happy all the time. And that's really what social media has sort of evolved into, is just this highlight reel of people's happy moments. I'm not saying that you can't share the happy moments in your life, but it's very, very rare to find people also sharing the uncomfortable things or the not so great things to happen, right? Because think about it. Think if you saw some sort of influencer and they only posted the shitty things that happen in their life. You probably are gonna get tired of seeing them just kind of complain about things and talking about how they always feel bad, right? Because we go to social media for an escape. If we are seeing just this negative stuff from someone over and over and woe is me kind of stuff, then we usually unfollow them, right? Because we're not getting that escape there. So the reason that influencers only post the highlight reel is because that looks more addictive to us. And then we start feeling in our brains, well, what's wrong with me that I don't have this kind of life that I'm seeing on someone's Instagram profile? And it really feeds into that negative cycle, and it just never ends. So in the short term, forced positivity does provide a sense of relief, because we do temporarily feel a little bit of relief from those painful emotions when we are we'll just look on the bright side. We feel a little bit better for just a little bit usually, but that comes at a cost, because over time, if we just keep pushing those feelings away and we just always suppress those negative emotions, then we always suppress the not so great feelings, the uncomfortable feelings. If we do it just a few times and then we feel better because of that, then we are conditioned to just keep doing that, and then eventually we don't even acknowledge bad things. The reality is they're always there, right? So we might not be allowing ourselves to think about the negative things, but they're still there under the surface, right? Just because you're not acknowledging it doesn't mean it's not happening. Think about when you go to the dentist and you have to have a tooth pulled. They give you lidocaine or whatever, right? So you don't feel the tooth being pulled, right? You shouldn't have any pain. You don't feel the tooth being pulled from your mouth. That doesn't mean that the tooth wasn't pulled. So even though you are not acknowledging those not so good feelings, that doesn't mean they're not there. And by not acknowledging they're not there, by totally dismissing them, then they just linger there, and we learn to, we don't ever process those emotions. We don't learn skills to effectively manage our emotions. We don't learn how to talk about them effectively. We don't communicate about them. So over time, that leads to a sense of feeling like we're not living a very authentic life. We're not being our true self, because we're not really expressing how we feel. We're not being truthful with the emotions that we're having. We just kind of have this happy facade. But again, it's a facade. It's a mask. How many times have you heard the word masking? We hear this a lot with neurodivergency, but that happens with depression and anxiety too, where we feel like we're wearing a mask, we're trying to look happy because that's the right thing to do. That's what society expects us to do, is just be happy. So not only do we have that sort of shit from it, but then we feel really isolated over time too. And like we kind of dig ourselves a hole. Like I'm so deep into this, like I am so lost. I am so not my true self right now. I feel so isolated. I feel so alone. There is no way I can get out of this. I must be the only person that feels this way. So it just leads to a lot more self-doubt, just not feeling like ourselves at all, and it feels really impossible to escape. That is where I ended up after this self-help journey, and I really internalized like it's my fault I don't feel good because I don't have good thoughts. I'm not always positive, so it's my fault I feel so depressed and anxious. I got so deep in that hole that I didn't feel like I was ever myself, because again, I was wearing this mask of happiness. I felt like I couldn't really open up about how I was really feeling because that was wrong. If I did that, then that was acknowledging the bad feelings, and the books tell me I can't have the bad feelings, only positive feelings. It makes things look so bleak. And it's scary, the thoughts that you have when you're in that hole. And I feel like a lot of society is in that hole. But again, we don't talk about it because that's not what we are supposed to do. So what are we supposed to do about this problem? First, we have to recognize that this is a problem. This is what's going on very, very frequently on a daily basis. This is what's happening, and we have to recognize the signs of that. We talked about a few of these signs already, which most of us have likely experienced. We've either said them to somebody or someone has said them to us, probably both, but it's the language that we're using and the words that we're using with ourselves and with other people. So things like saying, just stay positive, look on the bright side, everything happens for a reason. I know I keep saying those phrases, but those are the ones I hear the most frequent. When we recognize that those are sort of hallmark toxic positivity, hallmark forced positivity slogans, essentially. So again, on the surface, it really doesn't seem like it should be harmful, or it could be harmful, because usually, again, it's coming from a place of trying to be supportive and comforting for that person, or we just really don't know what else to say. But again, saying those things, we are conditioning ourselves and other people to feel uncomfortable talking about anything bad, because using that really shuts down any opportunity to express anything further. Those sort of sentences invalidate people's feelings. It dismisses their feelings. Again, how have you felt when someone's used that verbiage with you? Maybe kind of placated in the moment, but you don't feel like you can say anything else, right? Because that feels like their advice. That's all they can say. Okay, what do I do now? So something better that we could say is, like instead of saying, well, just think positive, we could say, the way you're feeling is valid. That's a normal way to feel. Or, I hear you. I hear that you're feeling really sad right now. I see that you're stressed. So we are acknowledging those feelings that other person is having, right? So they might not have that natural instinct to identify the real feeling because, again, they are probably conditioned to only feel happiness too. So by you acknowledging, I see that you feel sad right now. You know, that really sucks that this happened to you, but I see that you're sad. That, one, acknowledges the feeling in them, and it gives them sort of permission to feel that. It makes them feel like that is okay, and it makes them feel like they can talk about it a little bit more with you, if that is something that they want to do and something that you're open to as well. Don't worry. I have heard this a lot from a few different patients. Well, what if I say something like, oh, you know, you seem sad, but they're not actually sad. Aren't I just going to piss them off? You're not actually. If you mislabel the feeling that they're feeling, 9 times out of 10, that person's going to correct you. So if you say, I see that you're feeling sad, and that's not the right feeling, they will tell you, no, I'm actually not feeling sad. I'm actually just feeling really angry. It's still allowing that productive conversation to happen about the feelings. It's allowing them to build that skill of acknowledging the real feeling too, that emotional identification. So don't worry about not getting the feeling right. So take a look at what sort of language you're using with other people. Just watch out for people trying to brush off heavy problems or heavy feelings. Watch watch out for yourself trying to do that as well. Also watch out for people using a lot of those like positivity quotes all the time. Again, I'm not saying that positivity is a bad thing. Again, optimism is a good thing. Optimism, the hopefulness, that does show, good outcomes for the future. Those are good things. But it's when we're, again, totally dismissing anything except positivity, that's when it's a problem. So what do we actually do to fix it besides just being aware? So we need to learn to build a specific skill, and that skill is called emotional authenticity. And that is exactly what it sounds like, being real and being honest about our feelings. This is a direct contrast to that forced positivity because it means we acknowledge and we recognize all of our emotions, not just happiness, not just when we feel good. We are also acknowledging that we also sometimes feel sad, stressed, frustrated, angry, whatever it is. We acknowledge and recognize that those emotions are just as normal and expected to happen as happiness, joy, love. All of them are normal and all of them are okay. We have to learn how to be honest about our feelings and be truthful about what we're really feeling, even when it's uncomfortable or painful. Like I said, I really struggle with this, especially in close relationships and relationships with loved ones, because I often fear that expressing my true feelings is going to be too much for that person, or I just don't feel like burdening them with how I really feel. And then even more underneath that is, depending on the person, sometimes I'm afraid that if I'm truthful about not being happy all the time, that they're going to see me as a less person in some way, shape, or form. Like there's something wrong with me because I'm not positive all the time. And I know that this is absolutely 1000% not true. Logically, I know that it's normal and okay to not be happy all the time. But again, that societal pressure, it really gets to me sometimes that, if this person has this expectation that we should be happy 99% of the time and I'm not, they're going to think that something is wrong with me. So if we're more authentic with our feelings, we're more real with our feelings, we feel better internally because we feel like we're being honest. But then we actually learn how to learn from our feelings. So our feelings are our body's way of telling us things about our life that maybe we're not clued into. So when we learn to recognize feelings for what they are and we don't just try to brush them off, we recognize the sadness, we recognize the anger, and then we can sort of recognize what's happening in our brains behind the feeling. If we acknowledge I'm feeling mad right now, then naturally we think, why do I feel mad? And then we can identify those reasons why we feel mad. And that helps us understand what we need to do to feel better, to work towards happiness and joy. So this past weekend, I was feeling really stressed and sad about a number of different things. Definitely had lots of crying going on. At first, I just wanted to cry and then just brush it off, right? Because that's my natural reaction, is just stay positive. I'm gonna cry for these 5 minutes and that's it. Then I'm back to being happy. But I didn't. And I stopped myself and I really thought, why was I feeling so sad? Why was I feeling so frustrated in that situation as well, and in that moment? Once I was able to stop crying and I really thought about the reasons behind the feeling, I was able to identify that I was feeling really unproductive. I'd been feeling really lazy, and that's why I felt sad. I felt unproductive, like I wasn't working towards goals, like I'd been just so totally lazy. That was making me feel frustrated. That was making me feel sad. So then we take it a step further, okay? So I've identified I feel like I've been lazy. I feel like I've been being unproductive. Well, why is that? Oh, because I haven't been exercising, because all of my free time has been playing The Sims and Subnautica, because I've been eating fast food and not cooking healthy meals. So I was able to identify the reasons why I was feeling that way because I tuned into the feeling. If I had done my usual of just have my cry session, feel bad for 5 minutes only, and then go back to the positivity, the only happy thoughts thing, right? I never would have identified the reason why I was feeling sad and frustrated in the first place. So now that I allowed myself that space and recognized, okay, I don't feel so good. Why is that? I was able to identify feeling lazy and feeling unproductive. So now I know, okay, well, if I am working towards goals, if I'm being more active, if I'm eating better, if I do those things, then I'm not going to feel sad. I'm not going to feel unproductive, and then that will lead me to joy. If I had not taken the time to do that, then I would have, just been in this toxic positivity, this forced positivity, and never realized what the root cause was and actually have something to work on. So those, I think, are the two basic first steps that we take towards fixing this forced positivity issue. One, acknowledge our true feelings. Do not brush things off. That causes a huge fucking mess in the end. The other big thing, again, is realizing and recognizing the language that we're using with ourselves and with other people. Feeling is good for you. Even if those feelings don't feel good, we need to experience those feelings. We need to experience all of it. Real happiness is not about feeling good all of the time. That is unrealistic. That is never going to happen. As much as you will it into existence and as much as you want it to be that way, we cannot think ourselves into always being happy. That's just not the human experience. If someone is happy all of the time, it's probably fucking fake and they're probably really suffering beneath all of that. Real happiness is about feeling everything fully and in a real, authentic way. This leads us to a more balanced, honest relationship with our feelings over time. And then we feel like we are living the truest version of ourselves. And that is the real key to happiness.